Drasko Draskovic, who is head of exploration at UNDP here in Serbia. Has a very lengthy and impressive career and biography, so I'll just pinpoint to some of the coolest things. So he now works at UNDP, but previously worked as an innovation expert for the United States in Geneva, where he advised governments helping to boost their national innovation capabilities. Before that, he was a senior fellow at CERN, where he was responsible for development of new instruments for the upgrade of the Large Hadron Collider, and many, many other interesting things. But
thank you.
If you can take over, thank you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference for the invitation, and it's now a long-term collaboration between UNDP in Serbia and the Data Science Conference. And it's very important for us to come here to present and to meet so many young people, to meet people from the academia, from private sector, from the government, from NGO sector, and to present our work. UNDP is a UN development agency that works in about 170 countries and territories, and it has a critical role in helping countries achieve the sustainable development goals. That means we are working on eradicating poverty, reducing inequalities and exclusion, and build the resilience so that countries can sustain progress. That means resilience to all the mega threats, the effects of the climate change, the environmental damage, the biodiversity damage, and so on. 3 years ago, UNDP started a network of social innovation labs around the world. They are called Accelerator Labs. And there are new teams of UNDP, small teams, agile teams that should bring new ways of working, introduce new methods to UNDP's work, bring new partnerships, and simply push the barriers of the possible. And the reason for that is that we live in the times of unprecedented volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. I'd like to ask you if you can recognize this image. How many of you can recognize this famous photograph? This is the photograph of the planet Earth from a record distance of 6 billion kilometers. It's the Voyager 1 photo by NASA in 1990. So that space probe was leaving the solar system, and it was really far, and from the maximum distance that it never happened before that we have a photo of the planet Earth, and Carl Sagan, the famous physicist, asked for this photo, and he called it the pale blue dot. The reason for that is that you can see this small dot, and in all this huge infinite space, some life is happening, and there is no more life around. And there is a nice video on YouTube that I would recommend everyone to watch when Carl Sagan speaks about this photo, why it's significant for him. And he says, there is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of the human conceit than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. I put this photo because this week we celebrated the arrival of the 8th billion human being born 3 days ago. And it offers a new opportunity to reflect and reconsider what our values are. And that's why I wanted to introduce this video to you if you haven't seen it. This is another photo of the planet Earth, more recent one by NASA, and it's composite night lights. So you can see where people live by night, their lights. But interestingly, we still have about 1 billion people without the electricity. So out of 8 billion people, we have 1 billion who live without the electricity, and they are not shown here. So when we wanted to measure, for example, depopulation using night lights, we had to have in mind that in certain parts of the world it's impossible to do because simply there's no electricity. This is another photo, another visualization of a few years ago. It's Facebook members and how they are connected. So this is Facebook connectedness, social connectedness index visualized, and it's probably 6-7 years old. This month, Facebook, I just checked the data, had 2.9 billion members around the world. And out of 2.9 billion, out of 8 billion that I just mentioned, there are 3 billion who have never gone online. So now we have more people who have never been online than people on Facebook. So when you see this big visualization, you should have in mind that there's more than this, those who have never ever used the internet in their lives. So our motivation is that UN and UNDP are working on one of the main principles is to leave no one behind, and whatever we do, we always think about those who didn't have and who still don't have the privilege to be on Facebook. As I already mentioned, we live in a polycrisis. UNDP is measuring Human Development Index that is measuring countries' progress in human development, socioeconomic progress. And it's been doing that. It's a composite index that started in 1990, and every year it's been measuring. And there is Human Development Report, that is the flagship publication of the development world, which shows how countries are doing in terms of human development. The last 2 years, majority of countries, 9 out of 10 countries, experienced a decline. Simply now in 2021, last data is for the end of 2021, we came back to the level of 2016. That means that we wiped out our progress, like 5 years of progress during 2 years of the pandemic. And that was even before the war in Ukraine started. So this year, we have, what happened is that these two crises, war in Ukraine and COVID crisis, arrived back to back. And now we have polycrisis. That means that war in Ukraine, the energy crisis, COVID crisis, and ecological crisis around the world. And the UN even postponed the Summit of the Future that was scheduled for 2023. They postponed it for 2024 because one of the main premises that United Nations was founded to preserve peace in the world. Unfortunately, at the moment there is a big war, the biggest war in Europe after the Second World War that we are dealing with. All UN agencies are very much involved with that. UNDP Accelerator Labs are trying to better understand these complex issues by using collective intelligence. What is collective intelligence? That's actually something that people have always been doing. That means that when people work together, they mobilize more ideas, more insights, and a wider range of information that helps them to solve problems. What has changed recently with collective intelligence is that it has accelerated due to digital technologies. So we have a much wider range of information that is available to us. every day we are producing huge amounts of new data. We have computer systems that allow us to store the data, to analyze it, to get some insights. And we also have artificial intelligence that extends human intelligence, and it helps us in many ways to understand certain patterns, and we use artificial intelligence a lot in our work, and I'll show you later. So basically, you can think of it as crowdsourcing, co-design, and there are many collective intelligence methodologies. There are more than 50, like crowd mapping, remote sensing, open source repositories, web scraping. We are combining data sources, doing predictive analytics, citizen science, natural language processing. And as I said, the AI methods in combination with other methods are great for processing, synthesizing, and finding patterns in data. We are working with big data sets, and probably most of you know what big data is, but the definition is saying that it's a form of digital data where information is finally disaggregated over space and across time, and it has these 3 V's: high volume, high velocity, and high variety. Volume refers to the amount of data. Variety refers to the number of types of data, and velocity refers to the speed of data processing. When we use big data in concert with traditional data, it allows us new effective responses to fast-moving situations: pandemics, economic shocks, natural disasters, conflicts. It also allows us micro-targeting of the most vulnerable and marginalized populations. And there are many challenges when we work with big data. We have to address data access, data ownership, accuracy, validity, privacy, security. How do we govern data? What are the standards of interoperability when we are exchanging it? And also the intellectual property rights, data science biases in algorithms, and so on. That means that what we have to do is we need to identify where big data can add value and do it in an ethical and trustworthy manner. This is a nice framework that our colleagues from the World Bank made. It's about explaining how big data can foster development. And the middle part is about humans. So it's human-centric. That means that all the data analytics and processing is done by humans. We have these big groups of individuals, civil society, academia. We have governments, international organizations, and private sector. And it's needed that all of them work together in order to have what we call data-driven policy making and data-driven development. That means that, for example, individuals in civil society and academia have a role in controlling that the government is doing it in a right way by having access to data, by having open data, or by having access to algorithms that are used for processing of the data. And UNDP is supporting open data in Serbia. It started doing that in 2016. There is a national open data portal, data.gov.rs. There are more and more data sets that are open. And simply, as I said, it's important for transparency, and it's important for accountability, better policy making, service delivery, and for increased business opportunities, because private sector can also use open data for their own insights. But unfortunately, or fortunately actually, some data sets cannot be open. Some of them are sensitive in nature, some of them are confidential. For example, healthcare, medical information, financial records, everything that cannot be de-identified. And again, our goal is to navigate between the needs for data protection and privacy with openness that is needed to provide something that we call digital public goods with safeguards. There are many possible ways to realize data networks that are one way of providing data to a trusted group of individuals. For example, if we have researchers in the government or somewhere doing something for good of the whole society, then there are ways to provide data with certain limitations, and I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but what we are doing in practice, we are doing anonymization, aggregation, differential privacy. We are working with dummy data. Many times we don't provide real data, but dummy data, and everything is done on dummy data, and then the data never leaves the organization that is the holder of the data. And the new concept is synthetic data, which I really liked. It's actually data that is artificially generated by algorithms, and it's trained on original data sets. It replaces rather than modifies data, and it still maintains statistical integrity. It's a great alternative for anonymization techniques. It maximizes privacy and usability of data, and reduces some of the typical trade-offs of the previous models. Again, UNDP in everything that it's doing, and the labs are adhering to stringent privacy protocols and protecting privacy. So all the examples that I'll show to you, we spend a lot of time thinking about that, consulting leading experts in this area of data protection and protecting people's privacy. We have digital divide with people who don't have access to the internet. Some progress was made, but we also have data divide in the world. That means that there is huge disparity between data use in private sector for commercial value, and in governments for the social value and international organizations. So it's comparatively weak when compared to what private sector is doing. And there are also countries that are lagging behind, far behind in that. So we need to think how to close the data gap, not only the digital gap. The AI is even more extreme example, because there are few countries that are much above the rest of the world in their AI progress. So there are two countries, actually, the United States and China, that are leading in AI development. So the rest is much slower, and then it brings a lot of consequences. What we have done about 1.5 years ago, we created a new partnership together with the World Bank, the OECD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IMF, and these 8 players decided to self-organize and to partner with some of the leading data providers, some of the leading Silicon Valley companies that are holders of our data, and also with some international organizations, for example, the European Space Agency. There is Starlink, Unicast, Waze. You can see all the big Silicon Valley companies are here, and they are providing certain data sets to UN, data sets that cannot be open, but can be very useful to get some new insights that are important for international development. And we were benefiting from some of them. I'll just go through a few examples. The first one is about the war in Ukraine. As you probably know, about 12 million people who are displaced, refugees and internally displaced, 12 million. And in the first few weeks, we wanted to better understand where they are going. So Poland was the main destination. Even I think Poland, more than 4 or 5 million people moved to Poland. And in the first few days, we wanted to understand the migratory patterns, because the majority of them were women and children. Our colleagues from Crisis Response made this using Meta, Facebook data. They used Facebook Social Connectedness Index and combined it with mobility data. And this shows where they crossed the border and then where they were moving. They also made a predictive model that could predict where people will move. And that helped to organize places where people would be accommodated and everything would be provided to them. So, for example, here you can see the population density map, which showed that certain parts of Poland had significant population change, like 200, more than 20% population change in certain parts of Poland. This was in March. Going back to Serbia, we were working with the government. We've been working with the government of Serbia to analyze better the phenomenon of depopulation in Serbia. Serbia is one of the 10 fastest shrinking countries in the world. It lost almost 1 million people in the past 20 years. And all the demographic projections are saying that in the next 30 years, it will lose additional 20%. And that is due to low fertility rates, high emigration and low immigration, and also short lifespan, 7 years shorter than the European Union, for example. And all of them together are giving the phenomenon that is critical, because it's not only about the numbers, it's also about the structure of the population. That means that we have aging population. The average age in Serbia is now 43 years old, and in 2030 it will be 46. That means that different population, different kind of population needs different health system, different education system, and it needs, actually we need to adapt our policies to new demographic realities. And understanding migrations is critical, because it's very hard to catch migrations, and we wanted to try to do it using alternative data, not the census data. Census is held once every 10 years, so it's not the best way. Let's try if we could do something different. So we used Facebook data to, actually it's Facebook ads data, to measure, to see where Serbian expats live. So these two maps compare the traditional data, UN data, and the second map is using Facebook data. You can see 82 countries where Serbian expats live, and the upper map is around 50 countries, so there are 32 more in this. The reason for that is that there are some countries that never publish data. There are countries that never organize census. There are many reasons why this data set was not so good, and then if we can use different data sets, we can get some new insights. For example, we found out that about 1/3 of Serbian expats lives in Germany and Austria. The 36% are below the age of 35, and 28% had tertiary education. This was based on 4 million Facebook members in Serbia. So Facebook algorithm detected Facebook algorithm knows very well who is a tourist and who is an immigrant, because they cross the data, they don't use what you enter as your location, but they use GeoIP location, they use mobile data, because Facebook is also the owner of the WhatsApp and Instagram, so it's a huge data set. And then out of 860,000 Serbian migrants in 82 countries, we could measure what was happening during COVID. So we started measuring in October 2020, and then we found out that basically the number of Serbian expats decreased. And the reason for that is that some people simply from Western Europe mostly returned to Serbia. Some of them lost their jobs there. Some of them felt more secure in Serbia. So we had 100 and something thousand people less, expats less abroad. And then it started rising again, and now it's more or less back to the pre-pandemic levels. So this is the way how one country can have real-time insights, how many people are moving in or moving out. Unfortunately, we cannot use this for Russia and Ukraine, because simply Facebook is not very popular there. They have VK as an alternative of Facebook in Russia. So, but this was one experiment. The other one was to measure brain drain of Serbian academics who left the country, and we analyzed the papers, the academic papers, people who published their first paper in Serbia and then moved abroad. And we found out of around 10,000 academics, people who already published papers, around 9 point something percent, 960 of them left the country in the past 20 years. And then we wanted to see what's happening with them when they leave. We found out that majority of them don't collaborate with Serbian academics anymore. They just leave and they stop collaborating. Those who do collaborate, those who stay and who collaborate with those who left, publish much more. And there are many other insights that show the importance of the academic diaspora. Even when they leave, if they continue collaborating with Serbian academics, it's beneficial to both these groups. And it's very important to connect and to build knowledge networks. This is another Facebook experiment. This is actually Facebook population density map, which is one of the best in the world because it is using 30 by 30 meter grid tiles, very precise ones, and they are combining the machine vision AI with satellite imagery and with the census data. So this is for Belgrade. This is, you can see Belgrade, where people live in Belgrade. We also measured commuting zones. They are very interesting because there are some functional zones where people commute. And you can see that, for example, in Serbia, in this dark blue, 2.8 million people live there. And there are some commuting zones that are crossing the national borders. You can see, for example, people from Pirot go to Sofia, in Bulgaria very often. So these functional regions are very important for development. We used LinkedIn to measure brain drain. We wanted to see what are the destination countries of LinkedIn members from Serbia, what are the skills that Serbia is losing, and what are the industries that are most affected. And then it's close to real time, 700,000 LinkedIn members from Serbia. We can see that research is the most affected, higher education, internet, IT. We could also see what are the main destination countries based on LinkedIn data for professionals and seasonal workers from Serbia. We used the night lights to see where depopulation is happening in Serbia. So this is the night light map of Serbia. And we also partnered with mobile operators to analyze mobile data. We have a partnership with all 3 Serbian mobile operators, and we measure the activity, telecom connectivity, how people communicate in Serbia, and mobility paths. Mobility paths are very important because no one in Serbia deregisters from their hometown and they move to big towns, and then the only way to follow is using mobile data and see what are daily commuting patterns. And it's also very important for all kinds of infrastructure, urban planning, and so on. Everything is open. What we do is this was with Biosense and Telecom. It's a portal that was made, and anyone can check how people are connected, where they are traveling to, and there are so many insights for everyone here. So I will share the links later. Another problem in Serbia is about waste management, about ecological disaster. This was Potpečko Lake on the Lim River in January 2021. There were floating islands of plastic, and it happens every year in January, February, when water is just arriving from the mountains to the rivers. And we wanted to use machine learning, actually deep learning, and this was ResNet artificial neural network that we wanted to train to recognize illegal waste sites. So we worked with European Space Agency. They provided high resolution satellite data, and then we trained a model that recognized 67 illegal waste sites. This is the Lim River in Serbia, around 100 kilometers of its flow through Serbia. And we also developed an application that where everyone can report illegal waste site, and this is now communicating with the Ministry of Ecology and with the local municipalities, so that it can be cleaned and it can be preserved. The nature should be preserved. So more than 20 different alternative data sets that we use, LinkedIn, Google Trends. I didn't mention many of them. And we also partnered with a lot of companies in Serbia that could provide us with the data. For example, InfoStud provided us with some data set about the labor market to understand better the demand and the supply of jobs in Serbian towns. With the statistical office, with GeoSerbia, international collaborations with Harvard, Europe, Brookings, World Data Lab, and to conclude, yeah, I should conclude. There is continuous demand for information. In everything that we do, we need real-time information. We need to know what's happening on the ground. We also need to understand that there's no data set that is perfect. That means that we need to combine everything that we have and to use alternative data alongside statistical and traditional data. And it's not whether we should do that, but how. How means that whatever we do, we need to take into account that there are biases encoded in data, encoded in the algorithms, especially in the big data. And whatever we do, we need to test if that data that we have resembles the situation on the ground. The next conclusion is that we need to combine data analytics with human-centered design. So one way is exploratory way, like from the top down, and the other way is to go to talk to people and to design all the interventions together with people. And data is helping because it gives us real-time insights, and not only for planning but for the interventions, because we can measure success of our interventions. What we need systems thinking. We need long-termism. That means that we need to avoid short-term bias that is always present. We need new kinds of organizations, agile, experimental, and open. And our vision is that a knowledge society should exist where people exchange their learnings. That means that, for example, if we want to tackle a problem of depopulation, there is such a huge number of actors who are influencing that, and they all have their own learnings. And if we find the ways to do the knowledge management, to exchange these learnings in real time, that's the only way to achieve systemic shift. And UNDP is pioneering some ways of doing that through our work on innovation portfolios. And finally, we need new kind of education. The education that combines subject matter expertise with learning methods of public problem solving. What are they? Some of them I mentioned today. They are collective intelligence, behavioral insights, data analytics, mindset, solutions mapping, which means that we need to work with the communities to find the solutions that maybe some people found themselves. And this is the website of the Global Accelerator Labs, and the other one is the lab website in Serbia. You can get in touch with us through these websites, and I'm also available on LinkedIn and Twitter, so thank you very much.
We have time for a few questions, if there's any. If not, thank you, Drasko, for a very insightful and practical presentation.